Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join real estate entrepreneur and mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
Guys, welcome back to the Construct Your Life podcast. This is Austin Linney here, and I have the honor of having Mr. Jack in the house. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing wonderful, Austin. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, man. You have a wild story, man, and that's why I'm really excited to bring you on and kind of talk about what you do, but talk about what you've been through, and just share all the wisdom that you've learned over the years. So, with my guests, what I like to do is let them tell their story and start where they want to, and we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. Yeah. Gosh, I'm someone who, as a kid, didn't know what I didn't know. And so as a kid growing up, I was a very strong proponent of the victim mentality. So anytime something didn't happen the way I didn't want it to happen, God forbid, right? My reaction to it was absolutely terrible, and it made things worse. And it was occasion after occasion after occasion, whether it was, broken feet, broken nose, leg saving surgery, reconstructive hip surgery, shoulder surgery, concussions, all this type of stuff. I kept doing and reacting the same way, which, if that's not the definition of insanity, I'm not sure what is, And what I finally realized about 2.5, 3 years ago was, this whole suffering thing is something that you can get good at responding to what happens to you. And I had a doctor, diagnose me and tell me I had this really rare form of kidney disease. And he basically said, I told you just about your kidneys, but it doesn't mean you have to be stressed and depressed. And it finally just clicked. I was like, oh shit, I don't have to respond and throw a pity party and woe is me, and get all this attention from being the person who's been through a bunch of stuff. I connected a lot to that quote that, sickness and injuries, it's a problem for the body, not the mind. It's only a problem for your mind if you decide it is. And it was just that one simple conversation. That was that light bulb moment where 23 to 24 years, I reacted to adversity the same way. And then finally, it was my aha moment where I started to change. And I know that was a big scan through, but that's in a nutshell what has gone on with me in my 27 years on this mud rock floating through space.
Well, in the same vein of that, if you talk to, because I deal with it from time to time, if you talk to divorce guys, they're like, right? Like, they tell me like, she rejected me. That's what they say. Like, she rejected me. And I'm like, yeah, and she's one person. And they're like, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that means that and I love that doctor said yeah, there's a kidney problem, but your arms, your legs, your brain, they still work.
Yeah, he was very insightful because he could tell without even asking me. He could just tell I wasn't doing well mentally. I just was very short with my words, and it was just obvious. You can body language, breathing, you know the drill. And I perked up when he told me that, and it was just unbelievable. From there, it was a matter of okay, how, and it was just trial and error. And it's still a process of trial and error. By no means am I perfect at responding to what happens to me, but it's certainly way better than what it was for 24 years. And for 24 years, it finally took me 24 years to realize, there's an alternative. You can grow from it as opposed to just go through it, because it takes zero skill to have something bad happen to you. It doesn't take any talent to have that happen. Everyone does, right? But it definitely takes skill and a special type of person to learn how to actually grow from that and become better. And I'm still on that journey every single day.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting is that we as people, working out and working, right, are kind of the go-to for no matter what. even alcoholics work a bunch, like they can work, functioning alcoholics.
Yeah.
And so when you're a young kid and you're ready to go and you're full of all this energy, to spend most of the year, not being able to work and be in the hospital, did that play with your mind a lot? Because I know that you're a trainer and you love to be in the gym. Like, how did you cope with not being able to do the things that you normally do?
Yeah, that was the culprit from the beginning. So ever since I can remember, I had some sort of injury or whatever. And so when I was in 7th grade, the first bad injury I had is I broke my left foot. And the day after it healed, I broke it again. So for 8 or 9 months during middle school, when I was supposed to be out there playing my sport, playing with my buddies, outside, practicing, being active, I was on crutches. And I was the crippled kid with the crutches, and, people had to carry my books for me and everything. And that was right there where the identity was taken from me. And I had zero clue how to live life without having my physical body, right? Because I had all these insecurities and all those things. And you're exactly right. And it eventually led up to when I was 23, when I was in the hospital for many, many days out of the year for 2 or 3 years in a row. We can get into that later, but that was exactly it. I had what my joys and what I thought was my identity taken from me, and I didn't know what to do. And it was a lack of social as well. That was thrown into it. There wasn't, when you're in 7th and 8th grade, there's not a ton of kids that would be like, oh, I'll come sit inside with you all day, So it's just, yeah. I got attention in a weird way from, it was almost like I was addicted. It wasn't almost like it was, but I'm not exactly sure how to word it still. I was addicted to the attention I got from suffering.
Yes.
I was attached to that because I lost my physical body, my ability to move and do sports and be active. So I became attached to the identity of the injured person. Oh, he's, feel bad for me type of thing. And that repeated itself over and over again for many, many years.
And how much, how often as humans do we do that all the time? It's that, we have an option to be seen how we want to be seen,
mm-hmm.
as long as we're letting them see us the way that we want to be seen. Does that make any sense? Meaning that how dare you have a different perspective of me because I built this construct in my mind that this is the way that you need to view me. And you're almost telling them, right? I think one of the things we've come up with in the last week, and my coach said is either surrender or get dragged. There's no other way around it,
Yeah.
And it's we're showing up on social media. We're showing up to this event, to this work, to everything. And our identities is so convoluted in how other people see us instead of just saying and that's the hardest thing is that identity. It's hard not to attach yourself to the working out, the business, what I look like, how much money I have in my bank account. But when you can conquer that and you can attach your identity to your values, who you are as a person and everything, then, no matter what's in the bank account, no matter what's, how do you feel, or if you couldn't work out for 3 days, then you can find space to be grateful.
That's exactly right. I didn't realize that until, 24 years old. Fortunately, I could say, some people I'm sure go the whole life without understanding that, which is a bummer. When I originally got injured and then I kept having things happen, different sports injuries, a couple years after that, I almost had my leg amputated and I almost had my quad muscles then taken out for a compartment syndrome injury. And once again, that was a year of rehab and being away from what I was known as the athletic guy who was really good at sports. So I started really getting good at getting very strict with what was in my control. So I started losing control of what I could do with my body. And I started losing control of my emotions. So I got really strict with tests and what I ate and how I looked, physical appearance, and that was obviously a hole that was, I was just digging myself a deeper and deeper hole, to the point of severe anxiety, depression, severe perfectionism. I remember in high school, I'm not sure if you're ever like this, Austin, but I got a 99% on a chemistry test. And I was pissed because I didn't get 100, like furious, like really stressed about it because I didn't get 100%. Ended up developing an eating disorder. It went that far just because my physical prowess was taken away. So I got really strict on what I actually had control over, which was what I consumed and how I did in school. So obviously that's a slippery slope,
Yes. And how did you go about shifting the narrative for you, and how have you changed in all the positive stuff that you're doing these days?
Yeah, well, I had a lot of downtime. So fast forward to in 2018, I was in the hospital for over 300 days. And then 2019, I was in the hospital for over 250 days. 2020, over 100 days. And it's gone down from there. A lot of downtime and a lot of time to reflect. And a lot of time when I was in the hospital, my vision was all blurry, messed up from different medications. And so I had nothing, I couldn't distract myself with TV or YouTube most days. And so I got really good at just holding myself accountable and realizing like my body, I can't move. I'm in this hospital bed hooked up to 100 tubes. I can't see very well. I used to have nurses like text my parents for me. So what I have left, all I have left is my brain. And so I just turned it into a game. I started getting really good to challenge myself on like giving myself a score on how well did I focus today and what's in my control versus what's outside of my control. How well did I respond to bad news from the doctor? How well did I control someone who had a weird or mean tone of voice? How did I let it affect me? I turned it into a game, just like sports. I gave myself a score out of 10, and I still do a daily scorecard for myself out of 10 with a couple of different things now. That was fortunately all I had to do, was just get really good at trying to practice sharpening my mind. Whereas before that, I had other outlets to distract me because I wasn't stuck in a hospital. So with all these injuries in the past, I had other things that could pull my focus away and keep me going down a dark hole, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's very fascinating because, I'm reading a book right now and they're talking about like boredom and like that amount of boredom and like not being able to distract yourself. You could have gone two different ways in the path that you've chosen. Like the way I think of it in my mind is you almost had like a mental Olympics, like where you're
Absolutely.
like sharpening your behavior and like kind of coming back to center on like, hey, I can control this the way that I took this news and so on and so on. And so, obviously now you're out of the hospital more than you've probably ever been in a while.
Yeah.
And, how do you step back into, what you do, which is now you're a trainer and a coach and all that stuff like that.
Yeah.
How do you step back into, to be honest with you, a world that you really don't even have a reference for much, because it's too, because nobody's going to give you, nobody's going to, they're not going to give you any credit for the time that you spent in that thing. And I think that's one of the most important points that I want to make. Any of my friends that have recovered from cancer or had medical issues is it's not some fucking rainbows and car bills when you get out. Like you have to work, you have to pay bills, it's regular things. Like, so you can't use that as a crutch, but it's part of who you are, but it doesn't define you.
That's exactly right. It took me a while to realize that, and it even took me a while to get to that point where I was really good at responding to adversity. The first year of being chronically sick, I handled it terribly, like a pansy, just very emotional and childish about it. And part of it was because I didn't think there was an end in sight. With all my other injuries, there's always an end date where I'd be like, okay, you're recovered. Once I did finally get out of the hospital more and more though, and got better at controlling my own, emotions. Yeah, it was a struggle. I didn't work for almost 3 years straight just because I couldn't. I was in the hospital all the time. And I started first volunteering. So I got into a retirement home, and then I started volunteering, helping mentor kids with disabilities, particularly autism, just to feel like I'm a productive adult. Because I went from college to hospital to attempting to be a productive adult. My first 2 or 3 years of adulthood was spent in the hospital bed. So I didn't really know what I didn't know. And I was very lucky, humbled. I got to go move back home with my parents. That's always a good time. And I started with volunteering, and then I started doing part-time work, and then part-time turned into full-time. And eventually, last August, I finally moved back into my own place, which was amazing. That was a personal sense of pride to be like, holy crap, I didn't necessarily look that far into the future to think I was going to be able to make a full-time living again, and like be a productive adult, because for so many years it felt like it just would have been a waste of time to think about it. But it's just very, very small. I did 2 days a week of volunteering, and then I did a day a week of work and 2 days of volunteering. It just kept increasing until eventually, you and I have talked about this, I got a little too over the line of work, borderline work addiction. So I've had to dial it back more. But it was just old adage, crawl before you walk. My dad's a CPA. He's, owned his own business long as I've been alive. So I had lucky that I had some mentoring from him as well. And very, very small baby steps until the goal is obviously to keep firing all cylinders, And
well,
you're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Go ahead.
I was about to say, you're exactly right. I've never gotten one client or one speaking gig or one opportunity because of what I've overcome. They don't just be like, oh, congrats, you've done all that. It's amazing. I want you to be my trainer now or my coach or come speak here. I have gotten one speaking gig from that. But for the most part, you're right. There's no handouts. And I just assumed I had overcome all this. So it's going to be super easy. Like nothing's going to compare. It's a different type of difficult and hardship though, going from making not even one penny for 3 years to now like being able to afford your own place and like work full time. It's an interesting challenge. They're both different, obviously, but you're exactly right. There is no handouts. Like no one really cares that much about my past. It can be inspirational, and I don't want them to, because it doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah, I think what's super important is that something you said there is like, the big Mount Everest for me was getting my own place, and there's people with Netflix and air conditioning and their own place and big ass house, and they're still miserable as fuck because we're not grateful because we've got too comfortable, and it can all be taken away just like that, and there is parts of you that will fight harder and are more appreciative. But I know, just like me and just like you, sometimes we have to be reminded how far we've come and how much further we're planning to go, and respect that moment in time when we were just, sitting in the hospital room, or when I was a drunk, or, all these things. And so, my hope to everybody is that they don't, we're trying to like come up with this kind of like saying, a lot of people are waiting to live instead of living to wait, and it's like, we're just creating a space where we're not respecting, we're waiting for that victimhood handout. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter what you've been through. We have to go to work, and then, you're just getting warmed up, and you're just getting your feet above you. And if something were to happen, I'm just saying, for shits and grins, if you had to go back for a day or two, I think that the attitude that you would present with it and the way that you would attack it would be totally different, because you have worked on yourself, and you are better for it every day.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. In a weird way, I'm not sure if you ever thought about this or felt the same thing, but when something like bad happens, adversity, trauma, whatever you want to call it, I get excited a little bit, not even a little bit. I get excited because I know if it's not death, I will get through it, and I'm going to be a better version of myself after it's done. So I was briefly talking to you about this past week. I had a kidney infection, and I worked the entire week with the kidney infection. And it was extremely difficult, obviously, because like my pinky toes hurt, everything hurt and I was sick. However, like in the middle of the week, I was so pumped because I knew once I got over it, I was going to be a better trainer, better human, better coach because I've gotten through it. Whereas the old version of me, I would have cried and called my mom and complained and bitched and moaned to my clients and stuff like that, and wanted some pity or someone to be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," And it's a fun challenge now, in the one way, if I ever feel like I'm losing it, I just will actively, strategically choose to put myself through adversity just to be like, oh, you're not hot shit, whether it's cold exposure, hot exposure, some physically challenging. That's the one way I've realized now that I'm not throwing a curveball every single week. If I go too long in my comfort zone, I'll just strategically do something that's really shitty. And I'm sure you can relate to that, knowing how you live your life. So, it's a really interesting dynamic. And I didn't, when you said there's no handouts, don't take things for granted, things to be taken like that. For so long, I knew that, like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, but I didn't comprehend it, until it actually happened to me. So it's interesting because there's a lot of things that are like, oh yeah, that's of course. And then once you actually experience it, it's different.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I think, we're creating something, whether, let's just use a podcast or company or whatever the hell you're creating, off of the narrative, that for whatever reason, it's supposed to be easy. Like, no, like that's the genesis to the thing. Like, do you really want this? Like, if it's too easy, then what's the point? I'm actually looking around going, okay, what's the rub here? Why, like, and so we need to get to a place where we can, not expect, but be prepared for life to stick us in ribs. I had a good friend ask me, do you think it's possible to be successful without getting punched in the mouth? And I answered in 5.2 seconds and said no. Because, even like the guys that I know that are worth tons of money, lost everything and they were Uber driving back in 2007, and they're better for it, right? Because they know the downside, right? And so we need to step away from the fact that everything's going to be perfect. Everything's going to be things, but what it's offering you is lessons. And with lessons, you sharpen the sword, you get stronger mentally, physically, everything. And, you had an opportunity to tell this narrative, for the rest of your life, if you choose it. It easily could be, it's be 80 years old and complaining about your plight in life. But you made a conscious decision to use it as fuel, not the other way around.
Yeah, one of the best examples I like to use when referring to what you're just talking about is like in the gym. My favorite workouts of all time, the most proud I've ever been in myself, my favorite, most memorable competitions were always the hardest ones. I don't like easy workouts. They're just boring. They're not fun. I don't grow from it, So that's one of my best things. Like I don't necessarily have clients that ever come in and like they want an easy workout. That's, you know what I mean? And so it's just the same thing in life is I wanted an easy road when I was younger all the time because I didn't know how to handle stuff that was outside of my control, which of course I can't, right? You can only control how you respond to it. And it's the same thing in the gym, same thing outside in the real world. It's, one of the things I love to say a lot is life is not what happens to you, it's how you respond when it happens to you. And I believe people who have things happen to them that are unfortunate, once they learn how to grow from it, they're very fortunate because they're going to be that much bigger, better, stronger. I feel really lucky. If I hadn't experienced what I've experienced, I would be completely a mental pansy compared to what I am now, easily. I just wouldn't have had the experiences and learned from it. And sharpening the sword, as you said.
No, I love that. And, as you look forward and you're, looking forward to the next couple of years, what is it that you're working on as a person in your business and just in general?
Yeah, for me, it's the next challenge. And that's, if that makes sense, for 3 years, outside of just overall something big and crazy that really gets sparks of fire in my ass for 3 or 4 years, the motivation to get out of the hospital and become a normal, productive human was my, that was it. That was my vision. That was my goal. It's every day what I woke up to strive towards. Now that's a reality, which is amazing. It's the next thing. Obviously I'd like to continue to grow my confidence as a trainer, as a coach, as a speaker, keep thriving in that area. But I feel like I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't accomplish and overcome what I've experienced just to live normal, if that makes sense. So I want to, I have big goals. I don't have the specifics on what it is yet. I'm the type of person, I don't want to run a marathon because that's too normal. I'd rather run a 100-mile race. So something that gets me extremely out of my comfort zone, but that's big, like one particular thing. I've been thinking a lot about that with a couple of my coworkers and a couple of my friends, and I haven't quite pinpointed it yet, but I'm the type of person that thrives on having something to shoot for, like most people, I'm assuming. And that's really it, besides just becoming more and more confident in this adult business world, which obviously I'm still learning. I would like to establish something in the near future that is, some might call crazy, and go accomplish it. I'm mainly thinking on a physical aspect, just because physically.
Have you watched 14 Peaks on Netflix?
I have. Yeah.
Don't watch stuff like that when you're pursuing your goals. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just selfishly, and it's just something I've wanted to do because I haven't been basically just a vegetable and 170 pounds and under, ICUs for many, many days and hospitals for many, many days for 2 or 3 years to accomplishing a non-ordinary event would be amazing. So this year I'm starting small. I'm going to do another CrossFit competition, which is great. I used to compete, competitively all the time in California. So I'm going to start there and then just keep crawling before I walk, just like I did when I was getting back into the adult life.
Well, I know that we talked a couple months ago, and I've already seen you grow up a lot since then, even more with your business and who you are as a person. So I only imagine with each passing month how more confident, more in shape, and more locked into what you're doing. So it's amazing to watch you come out of that. And, for anybody that's listening to this episode, you have an option to make a choice. It's as simple as that. And the choice that you make change your entire life. You can choose to wallow in it, or you can choose to do something great with it and use it as fuel. So it's really great to see that. And if people want to follow your journey and they want to figure out how to do that, how would they do that?
Yeah, I second everything you just said. You guys can follow me on Instagram at I am Jack Sernett. That's really my main hub. I don't have a Facebook. I am Jack Sernett. And then I'll be relaunching my website again. It's under some editing and tweaking right now, but it's going to be jacksernett.com. And I'm based out here in Kansas City. So if anyone is in the area, please give me a shout out. I am always down to meet up and do something badass. That's it.
Wonderful. Guys, if you got some value from this episode, share it with a friend. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Construct Your Life with Austin Linney. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to start constructing your life by taking immediate action on what you learned. For show notes, resources, and more information on one-on-one coaching with Austin, visit constructyourlifepodcast.com.